Hello out there in internet land. I am D. Jordan Burson, Director of Collections at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. I was a student intern at the museum a few years back, and during that time I became immersed in the wonderful world of scrimshaw while sitting in on meetings of the scrimshaw forensics team. They were and remain a very knowledgeable group, so needless to say, hanging out with them, I managed to learn a great deal more than I already did about antique ivory objects. Today I am going to cover best practices for care, handling, and storage of bone and ivory objects. I will begin by briefly describing some of the physical attributes of bone and ivory and causes of their deterioration. I will continue with practical recommendations for optimal care, handling, and storage practices, and since collections care is my thing, I am compelled to give this talk a little bit of a conservation-minded twist. I will emphasize the difference between conservation and restoration, include a look at some field research, and conclude with useful information for seeking out professional conservation services. I have a few photos of damaged scrimshaw to show you and discuss at the conclusion of this presentation. What is ivory? Although traditionally the term ivory referred to elephant tusks, the term is now generally applied to any mammalian tooth or tusk that is large enough to be carved or scrimshanted. Bone and ivory are chemically similar, but their physical structure is quite different. Both consist primarily of inorganic materials providing strength and rigidity, but also contain a soft organic component that allows for growth and repair. Bone and teeth are comprised of several minerals, with collagen being the major proteinaceous constituent. Collagen is the material of skin, cartilage, and tendon in all mammals. The ratio of mineral matter to organic matter varies considerably between the different types of bones, teeth, and tusks. Unlike ivory, bone has marrow at its core, from which a series of tiny blood vessels extend out into the bone. These are visible as pits, spots, or lines on the surface of the bone. You can often differentiate objects that are bone from those that are ivory by the presence or lack of these telltale marks. Ivory has no marrow or blood vessels. It is essentially tooth material and is whiter, harder, denser, and heavier than bone. The three components in teeth and tusks are enamel, dentin, and cementum. Often enamel is the outermost layer of a tooth, and enamel is almost entirely mineral in composition. It is very hard, one of the hardest substances found in nature, in fact. Not all teeth have enamel as an outer layer, however, and I will get into this in more detail in a minute. Dentin is the tough bulk of the tooth. Long protein fibers branch through the dentin, allowing the inward and outward movement of water for the purpose of hydration during life. When the tooth is removed and dry, these fibers collapse, leaving a network of tubules behind, which are essentially voids. These tubules are smaller than those found in bone, giving ivory a much finer grain than that of bone. During formation of dentin and enamel, small pockets of uncalcified proteins may remain that also leave such voids behind when dried. The arrangement of these voids represent areas of weakness in teeth in terms of where and how they would be predisposed to fracture. The more porous an object is, the more fragile and easily broken it tends to be. Cementum is the material that anchors teeth to the jaw. It is similar to bone in composition and structure, and filled with embedded living cells that, when dried, collapse, leaving voids that are visible as black spots. As mentioned before, enamel is not always found as the outermost layer in all cases. Sometimes cementum, or a variation of cementum, comprises the outer layer, and it is often referred to as bark or a rind. Tougher and more fibrous than enamel, Nature seems to have favored cementum over chip-prone enamel as a more appropriate material for elephant and walrus tusks that are used by the animals for prying and digging. Sperm whale teeth have enamel only at the tip, and often this is worn away in older animals. The primary surface area of whale's teeth is actually the dentin. Sperm whale teeth contain a higher proportion of collagen compared to other mammals, particularly in the cementum. Collagen absorbs water and in the living state is presumed to be at its maximum degree of absorption. When it dries out, it shrinks and becomes quite hard. Once dried, it reaches an equilibrium that is not prone to reacting drastically to short-term fluctuations in ambient relative humidity. But ivory is hygroscopic, meaning that moisture can and does move in and out of it, however slowly. Ivory is also anisotropic, meaning that it has different properties in each of its three dimensions of physical makeup, and thus expands and contracts unevenly, causing stresses that in turn lead to stress cracking. A reduction in moisture content results in differential or anisotropic movement akin to shrinkage. Studies have revealed that migration of water into and out of ivory is the principal cause of expansion and contraction, and ivory is more prone to these hygroscopic effects than bone, horn, or antler. Because hygroscopic movement in ivory is slow, it will not instantly become saturated if immersed in water. However, we know that hydration causes dimensional changes in ivory, and adding to it drastic temperature fluctuations will only serve to aggravate cracks or cause new fractures along vulnerable areas, particularly where voids are present. Furthermore, the organic portion of ivory is decomposed by prolonged exposure to moist conditions, and cracking tends to result from this loss. Remember that air at a low relative humidity attracts moisture, drawing it out of saturated materials, while air at high relative humidity makes it available to materials that are dry and capable of drawing in water. When ivory draws in moisture, swelling can occur. Many nautical antiques are composites of a range of different ivories and other materials joined together with adhesives, and changes in humidity can cause uneven stresses between unlike materials, at adhesive joints and mortise and tenon connections. We know that both temperature and relative humidity play a role in the swelling and contraction of ivory. A study in the early 1980s by Raymond LaFontaine and Patricia Wood of the Canadian Conservation Institute indicates that humidity plays the major role in expansion and contraction movements in ivory, although some older reports place more emphasis on temperature extremes. This same Canadian study aimed to develop methods for stabilization of ivory using two distinct treatment approaches. Their first objective was to figure out a way to minimize moisture content and changes in ivory, and the second was to find a way to reduce the inherent brittleness of ivory, and thus increase its ability to withstand dimensional changes resulting from moisture and relative humidity changes. To reduce inherent brittleness, researchers impregnated ivory with plasticizers. This actually worked to improve the plasticity of ivory, but had adverse effects aesthetically in the form of discoloration. Because of unsatisfactory trial results, this methodology was abandoned in favor of simply employing moisture barriers to minimize hygroscopic action. The researchers studied several moisture barrier coatings and found that Saran 150, a polyvinylidene chloride latex emulsion, aka PVDC, was particularly effective when applied to various types of ivory. Unfortunately, this emulsion is prone to visible yellowing in as little as 5 years. PVDC can be removed with tetrahydrofuran, a solvent the study claims has little or no effect on ivory. However, rubbing and friction must be used, and this in itself is liable to alter the surface appearance of the ivory, particularly since the PVDC is less reactive to the solvent as it ages, and therefore requires increased amounts of rubbing for removal. The application of resins such as cellulose nitrate and oils such as linseed for the purpose of protecting ivory is not advised. These coatings will all inevitably degrade and discolor in reaction to pollutants, light, and changes in temperature and humidity. I will cover the effects of light on ivory in more detail in a moment. Light can be harmful to bone and ivory objects in several ways. First, direct light can elevate surface temperature of objects through radiant heat. Lamps inside sealed display cases can cause very high internal temperatures and cause rapid fluctuation of relative humidity. When placing your ivory near light sources, test the area with a light meter. Illumination should be kept below 150 lux, or lumen per square meter, with the ultraviolet component restricted to 75 microwatts per lumen of visible light. And objects colored with dyes should be exposed to 50 lumen per square meter at most. Light damage is cumulative and not reversible. Thus, the duration of exposure to objects to light should be limited. If you keep your bone and ivory in an illuminated display, a timer shutoff may help you significantly reduce light exposure. The general rule is that damage is proportional to illuminance times length of exposure. An object exposed for 10 hours at 200 lux is subject to the same amount of damage as if it were exposed for 40 hours at 50 lux. That's a total of 2,000 lux hours in both scenarios. Light can damage objects in different ways. Ultraviolet and visible light set off chemical changes such as the fading of inks, dyes, and pigments. Infrared radiation heats materials, causing expansion and mechanical stresses. Organic materials are most vulnerable to the harmful effects of light. Of great concern is the potential for bleaching that fades the patina and original coloring agents. The effects of light on bone and ivory can manifest through a variety of visual and structural changes, although this will vary depending on the exact nature of the object. Factors that will influence these reactions in, let's say, teeth for instance, are the size and age of the tooth, metabolism of the animal, environmental and storage histories of the tooth, and the amount of polishing it has undergone. The reduction of the enamel or mineral layers in preparation for carving teeth exposes more of the organic core to light and thus tends to make them more vulnerable to damage. Of course, if an object has been treated with a protective coating or dressing, light may affect these as well, resulting in visible changes. The natural oils of the hand tend to adhere to and absorb into the surfaces of bone and ivory objects, potentially leading to discoloration. This can be good or bad depending on how you look at it, because oils and wear from handling will inevitably add to the object's patina. However, as a conservator and custodian of these pieces, we must take care not to contribute to their deterioration. Thus, it is always advisable to carefully wash and dry your hands before handling your collections. A fresh pair of nitrile gloves is even better than washed hands, and are the preferred gloves used in museums for handling a variety of materials. They leave no residues at all, and provide a nice safe grip. White cotton gloves are also a good choice. Both types of gloves can be purchased from Gaylord Brothers of Syracuse, New York, as well as other archival product and museum suppliers. It should be mentioned that it is prudent to avoid all contact with the image areas of scrimshaw where pigments can easily be disturbed or lifted out. Many folks tend to wrap breakables in bubble wrap, but bubble wrap, styrofoam, and the like should never be placed in direct contact with scrimshaw or other bone and ivory objects. Plastics can adhere to carbon black and other pigments, causing damage or loss to images, and or react with ivory surfaces, marring the finish. Unbleached, undyed, clean cotton cloth is a preferred material in which to wrap bone and ivory objects. Other good wrapping choices include unbuffered, acid-free tissue paper, and paper towels. If you wish to add an additional layer of bubble wrap for extra padding, that is fine, so long as it is not in direct contact with the piece. Keeping objects wrapped in this way when not on display provides protection not only from breakage, but also from dust, dirt, and light. It also adds a barrier of protection from climate change. Storage drawers and shelves should be lined with a chemically stable cushioning material such as polyethylene or polypropylene, more commonly called by their trade names ethafoam and microfoam. Here we see some teeth stored in custom-made slots of archival corrugated board on a bed of acid-free tissue paper with ethafoam underpadding. The drawer is powder-coated metal. It is important to avoid using rubber-based materials for storage or packing, as these can produce unnatural yellowing of ivory. Staining is obviously something to be avoided, and it is helpful to be aware of all of the many causes of staining to porous bone and ivory. Contact with rubber bands and other degraded polymers can cause stains. Contact with iron or copper objects in a humid environment may cause brown and green stains, respectively. Contact with unstable dyes, such as in cloth enclosures or display mounts, can cause transfer of color. Oils and fats that have been applied to ivory for conditioning or aesthetic purposes can darken and yellow with age. An application of oil might yield a short-term visual improvement by saturating colors and increasing gloss, but these will also trap dirt and possibly attract fungi and mold. Worse still, oil that hardens cannot be removed and it will darken. On the other hand, so-called staining may be little more than surface dirt and grime. In general, attempts at cleaning scrimshaw are as likely to cause damage as improve appearance. One should always approach a cleaning with caution, because the complex tonalities and aged qualities of patina are easy to disrupt, and once lost, they are gone forever. Patina is developed through the years by natural darkening, oils, and wear from handling, limited soiling, and I stress the word limited, etc., etc. Aside from the patina, the coloring agents might be faded or removed altogether by excessive cleaning, and the surface luster may be irreversibly marred. Remember that cleaning is not reversible, and dirt is part of the object's record and historical evidence of its history. We call this, quote-unquote, good dirt, and the risk of losing good dirt is another reason why even the simple act of cleaning should be approached with extreme caution. Because of the great potential for irreversible damage, it is generally advisable to apply nothing in terms of coatings and dressings to ivory pieces. In addition, strong cleaning agents such as bleach are verboten and should never be used. Aside from the fact that bleach is too harsh to begin with, it will leave behind salts that will cause ongoing damage to the ivory. And of course, any cleaning agent containing water can cause swelling. Most often, a light dusting with a soft brush is all that is necessary to keep ivory objects clean. If you have excessive surface dirt that is a visual detraction from the piece, you can use what some call, quote-unquote, human enzyme, or in other words, saliva. You can moisten a cotton swab with saliva and gently roll it back and forth over the soiled areas. In this way, moisture content is naturally low, and the natural enzymes and wetting agents present in saliva will effectively remove dirt. The rolling motion of the swab serves to lift from rather than rub around dirt on the surface. This type of cleaning should only be performed in cases where grime is excessive and considered detracting to the piece. Overcleaning must be avoided to protect the good dirt and its historical evidence. Residual adhesive from sticky labels can be removed with a small amount of mineral oil, also applied with a cotton swab and wiped away. Some sources say that it is okay to use water and a mild soap like Ivory Snow during the same cotton swab method. It is probably best, however, to use saliva in preference to proprietary, ever-changing, and mysterious soap formulations. Whatever you use, however, do not allow the surface of your ivory to remain wet for more than 15 to 20 seconds. Be sure to thoroughly dry the object as soon as possible after moistening using another cotton swab or soft tissue. Avoid applying water to cracked or porous surfaces, and never ever soak a piece of bone or ivory. Any very dirty object requiring extensive cleaning should be given to a professional conservator to treat. The same goes for any broken or friable pieces needing repair. The best place to look for an objects conservator whose specialty is bone and ivory, if you do not already know one, is on the website for the American Institute for Conservation, also known as AIC. Their website is This is a screen capture of the AIC homepage. You'll notice over on the right it says Find a Conservator. That's what you should click on if you want to find a conservator. You will then be taken to a page where you're allowed to select the type of conservation work you're looking for. You can see all of these specialties. If you clicked on Objects, you would be taken to this set of subspecialties. And if you look at where the red arrow is, you'll see ivory and bone is listed. When it comes to engraved scrimshaw, there are really no experts on the subject, but rather certain parties who are considerably more knowledgeable and experienced with it than others. Most objects conservators feel that a hands-off approach, as much as possible, is the best approach for now. Scrimshaw conservation methodology is evolving, and best practices are periodically revised. In general, though, conservators strive for repairs that are sacrificial. In other words, repairs are done using materials that are weaker than the object and give. Fills in ivory, when performed, must yield to the dimensional changes of the object, and adhesives must release fairly easily where applied so as not to cause additional damage. Consolidants that irreversibly permeate pores are generally considered to be taboo, as treatment reversibility, in theory, is paramount. I say treatment reversibility is paramount in theory because few treatments are fully reversible in the true sense of the word. Another reason why treatment decisions are made by conservators with the utmost caution. Many amateurs have glued bone and ivory pieces back together, posing headaches for later owners and conservators. There are 3 ways an adhesive treatment can go wrong. The first is by choosing an inappropriate adhesive that is unstable and difficult or impossible to remove. Then, even if an appropriate adhesive is used, it must be applied properly. And finally, it must set properly. Any improper use of adhesive will make future repairs considerably more expensive, if not cost prohibitive. In 1978, the Walters Art Gallery experimented with repairs to reinforce cracked ivory plaques. Several plaques in their collection exhibited cracks that extended almost their entire lengths, and because of warpage, the ivory on either side of the cracks did not meet at the same level. The front surfaces of the plaques were carved in relief, and the reverse surfaces were polished smooth. Because the objects needed to withstand fluctuating relative humidity levels during traveling exhibition, a method of reinforcement was needed that would support the plaques while yielding to ongoing dimensional changes. Adhesives containing solvents that might leach the constituents of the ivory, or any material requiring such a solvent for its removal, could not be used. After testing a variety of materials for reinforcing the ivory, a good solution was found in an unlikely product that is normally used to seal laboratory glassware. The product was Parafilm M, a highly flexible thermoplastic film manufactured by the American Can Company. The Walters Art Museum found that Parafilm M is easily applied and removed without solvents. Their method of application was to make the Parafilm M tacky and then apply it with a warm spatula over a sheet of silicone release paper. Parafilm M is flexible enough to conform to uneven surfaces, and it adheres very well to ivory. Best of all, once applied, it became almost invisible. Its elastic and plastic properties made it strong enough to protect the ivories from damage due to vibration and handling during exhibition, while allowing dimensional changes to take place without restriction. Parafilm M is still on the market over 40 years later and is available from laboratory and chemical supply companies. This case study is a good illustration of the care taken by conservators to problem solve and perform treatments that are as non-invasive as possible. These will prevent further damage to objects and certainly not cause additional damage. Professional conservators are required to provide complete reporting and photo documentation of treatments. They begin by documenting the object and its condition as received, both with photographs and a detailed summary of condition. During treatment, they document all treatments performed and materials employed, including technical and brand names of materials and supplies. Then post-treatment photographs and summary are completed. Anyone sending out objects for treatment should expect to receive this documentation. Collectors should keep it with the object as part of its historical record. This documentation is not only a record of the object's ongoing care, but will also serve as a valuable reference during subsequent treatments. Finally, it is important to recognize the differences between conservation and restoration. According to Merriam-Webster, conservation is a careful preservation and protection of something, planned management to prevent exploitation, destruction, or neglect. In contrast, the definition of restoration is a bringing back to a former position or condition, a restoring to an unimpaired or improved condition. Conservators, unlike restorers, do not treat objects for the purpose of making them look brand new. Conservators attempt to slow degradation as close to a halt as possible for maximum life expectancy of the object. All treatments are planned in advance to disturb as little historic evidence as possible. There is a fine line, however, as usually objects do look better after conservation treatment than they did before. Unlike restoration, conservators make aesthetic enhancements that still retain historic evidence and character. For instance, here are before and after treatment photos of a vintage 1911 architectural drawing. While the visually detracting damage has been reduced, you can still see evidence of where it had been. This Egyptian carved lion at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York was excavated in fragments. There was considerable loss to the object when found. When it was put back together, the filler was deliberately a mismatch for the purpose of consolidating the piece without trying to hide the historical evidence of its damage. In contrast, here we have a French scrimshaw and ivory desk. The scrimshaw had severe loss due to shrinkage of the substrate wood. The entire top of ivory and ebony was removed, restored, and carefully laid back after the substrate condition was corrected. In this case, the scrimshaw was recreated instead of conserved by stabilizing what original material remained. Had the process been to improve the aesthetics of the original inlay by filling, then perhaps it could have been referred to as a conservation treatment. I do not know what became of this piece, but hopefully they kept the original materials that were removed with the object for documentation. I'd like to conclude by looking at a few slides of damaged pieces and analyzing them from a conservation-minded perspective. As you can see here, the seat back of this scrimshaw chair fractured, and its two halves no longer line up. They moved in different directions, and no attempt should now be made to force them back together for a repair. Such an attempt would only cause more damage. On the other hand, this scrimshaw corset busk split in half completely, but there wasn't too much planar distortion from one side to the other. Consequently, it was possible to put little bridge repairs on the back. Somebody fashioned them out of bone or ivory, in this case. Scrimshaw swifts are very complicated and delicate items. Often it is the attached ribbon ties that fail at the pivot joints, disintegrating from old age and physical stresses. It sure takes a very patient person to put one of these back together again. And I will conclude with this final image of a piece of composite scrimshaw, mixed media, and as is typical when stored in a very fluctuating temperature and relative humidity, inevitably the different components move differently from one another and fall off. And that's what you see in the baggie at the bottom of the picture. So if you take anything away from this presentation and you're a collector, what you should do is maintain a stable relative humidity and temperature climate for your collections. I hope you found this presentation interesting and informative. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact me by email, jberson@whalingmuseum.org. Thank you very much.